Well, today is day 10 of the paralyzed Congress, unable to operate without a Speaker of the House. House Majority Leader Steve Scalise has emerged as the Republicans' top choice for the position, but he has not yet secured the 217 votes necessary to become Speaker. Now, with the backdrop of the war in Israel, government funding set to expire on November the 17th, will Republicans unify around a candidate soon? Joining me for an update is Congressman Nathaniel Moran. He serves on 3 House committees, including the House Committee on Foreign Affairs. He represents the 1st Congressional District of Texas. Congressman, welcome back to the program. Good to see you.
Tony, thanks for having me today. It's a pleasure to be with you as always.
So I know that it was a closed-door, members-only meeting, but give us an update on where things stand in the effort to select a speaker.
Yeah, today we had another 2.5 or 3 hours worth of conversation within the family conference, trying to work through this process to get to 217 for our speaker designee and our nominee, Steve Scalise. But quite frankly, we did not make much progress in that meeting, in my estimation. There's a lot of conflict. There's a lot of built up emotion. There's a lot of division within our conference. And I'm sorry to see that because as we've already seen in just the first few minutes of the program, there are some significant world events like we haven't seen in a long time that need to be dealt with. Congress has to be acting. We're never going to find a perfect speaker. If we're looking for a perfect speaker, we're going to have to look outside of the walls of the halls of Congress for sure. But we have to get back to work for the American people and for these bigger ideals.
So let me ask you, Congressman Moran, is that view shared by your colleagues? I mean, I think the gravity of this moment and what is happening around the world is much different than what it was last week when the chair was vacated. So are these external pressures moving members to a place of decision?
Unfortunately, it's not. It's, in fact, in some cases, it's moving them further into the corner to be positioned and to say, yes, some of them say, look, I agree there's bigger issues we need to deal with, but their bigger issues are institutional issues, which frankly, in my opinion, go beyond whoever sits in the speaker's chair, whether or not it's Kevin McCarthy or Steve Scalise or Jim Jordan or whoever the nominee is. That person cannot solve the illnesses that are here in Washington, D.C. Those illnesses are systemic, and they're as a result of all 435 of us in Congress on the House side, no question about it. So it feels like to me, and one of my colleagues used this analogy today, that we're the fire department and there's a 5-alarm fire going on around us. In fact, there's several going on around us in this world. And we are arguing about the color of the fire truck. We're missing the greater point here that we need to be focused on.
One final question on this subject, Congressman Moran. What's the plan going forward? Are we going to stay in town until this is resolved, or are members going to go home for the weekend?
It looks like to me that we're going to stay here for the weekend, but that hasn't been finally told. I specifically asked that question, should we plan to stay? Frankly, I think we need to stay until we get this resolved. There should be no break for Congress until we get this important matter resolved, but that's up to Patrick McHenry and Steve Scalise at this point. And I think they're going to be meeting with folks this afternoon to try to work out differences with those folks that are still holding out. Then we're probably going to come back together as a conference tonight, meet as a conference tomorrow again until we can resolve and hopefully go to the floor. But at some point, again, whether or not it's Steve Scalise or Jim Jordan, both of whom are great men, both of whom I said going into Congress, I would support whoever came out of conference as a nominee. We need to get behind a leader, get somebody in that chair so that the legislative branch can function, because we may have appropriations for Israel that we need to take care of. We certainly have appropriations bills that we need to get passed. We may have authorizations for use of military force that are necessary coming up. We've got so many other important things, border security being at the top of that we can't take care of if we are paralyzed in Congress.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. You mentioned border security. I want to switch topics here. You serve on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and unfortunately our southern border has become an entryway for foreign individuals, some of whom want to do harm to this country. We have now a former Hamas leader and Hamas itself calling for a national day or a day of jihad, global day of jihad. What do we know about this, and what do we know in terms of the threat to the U.S.?
Well, what we do know is more than 1 million individuals crossed over our border that we don't know who they are or where they went. They're gotaways during the Biden administration. The Biden administration can provide us no assurances that we can assess the security risk or protect against the security risk of those individuals. I was down in Eagle Pass, Texas, just a couple of weeks ago, looking again at the situation firsthand. And just in the Del Rio sector along the border, what we discovered was in this last 12 months, there were individuals from 98 different countries that crossed over that border. 27 of those countries have ties to terrorism. Now, that should be concerning to every American, because when they filter in, as we saw there on the border town of Eagle Pass, they get processed within 2 or 3 days. Then they're to an NGO, and then they're to wherever their, quote, final destination is, which could be anywhere in the United States. We will never know where those individuals go or what they're doing when they get there, because that border is so porous. And as a result of that, our nation is so much at risk now because we won't secure that southern border.
I know that yesterday's briefing was a classified briefing, so I'm trying to be careful in how I ask this question, but because I know you're limited on what you can say. But given what you know, and we have this call for global jihad, we've already seen protests in cities across the United States. We've seen violence on college campuses. Are you concerned that tomorrow we could see some type of activity, violent activity, attacks here in the United States?
Well, I would not say that folks need to be living in fear. They don't. I would say they need to be as vigilant as they should be in every other day. We live in perilous times, Tony. We live in times where groups like Hamas have said that they want to see the total obliteration. That's what their charter says, the obliteration of the Jewish nation. And they have declared a jihad against effectively the entire Western world. But that hatred from groups like Hamas and Hezbollah and others around the world is nothing new. We've seen this evil before. We'll see it again. Folks need to be vigilant. They need to report something, say something if they see something, but they don't need to live in fear. We know that at the ultimate conclusion of this, we are going to overcome. As Christians, we know that that's the case, that there's going to be victory in this world. But it doesn't mean we need to part from our wisdom and prudence in our actions. Just be careful in everybody's daily lives and observe and report. But certainly don't create a situation where hate breeds hate and the response is hate. We don't need to see that either.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. Congressman Moran, thanks so much for taking time to join us. Always good to see you.
Thank you, Tony. It's a pleasure to be here.